What's happening, all my friends out there? My name is Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. Now, some of you know that I love the Castlevania series. I actually reviewed the original Castlevania here on this channel before. But today we're talking about a game that has had a lot more big implications with the series later on, as well as also a lot more people seem to resonate it with years after its original release. Here in the United States, we got this game much later on, and we even got a really butchered port of this on the SNES, but today we're going to look at the original and see exactly what the fuss is all about. So without further ado, let's just dive into this review. This is Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Castlevania Rondo of Blood is the 10th entry of the fabled Castlevania series that began on the NES. This time, it's Richter Belmont taking on the family business trying to kill the evil Count Dracula, much like his ancestors Trevor and Simon before him. This game, however, has a more fleshed out story unlike its predecessors, which eventually has a greater implication in future games. Besides Richter, we're introduced to other characters like Maria and Shaft, who eventually become important later in the series' timeline. Though there aren't many crazy events that are memorable from the main plot, Rondo of Blood is the nexus for what made Castlevania go through a massive change in the years afterwards. It's not the most popular or remembered game of the Castlevania series, especially with what came afterwards, but it does have a visual and musical style that ended up sticking with the Castlevania games from that point forward. The original game never got released outside of Japan until many years later. Here in the US, we got a very shallow port called Castlevania Dracula X, but it was never a true translation of what Rondo of Blood actually was. As a standalone game away from any sequels, Castlevania Rondo of Blood has enough going for it that is both unique and interesting, even for those that never cared too much about the original Castlevania games. An interesting thing about Castlevania Rondo of Blood is that this is the first time in the series that I would argue that we get that anime influence in some of its visual style. Unlike its predecessors that came before on the NES and the SNES, which focused a little bit much more on hyper-realistic designs and even some of that gothic style we got later on, Castlevania Rondo of Blood focuses a little bit more on an anime style with its cutscenes, even some of its character designs, which I think look pretty damn good. Don't get me wrong though, even though it's a big departure from what came before, I still feel like it looks pretty damn cool and works within the aesthetic and overall tone of the Castlevania universe. One of the other cool things about Castlevania Rondo of Blood is because it's on the PC engine, we got a lot more layers of stuff in the background and also some of the different effects that we see throughout the entirety of the game. In some of the ports that came later on with the SNES and even some other platforms as well, this really didn't get any justice due to it. It was nowhere near on the same level of what we got on the PC engine. Again, we got this later on here in the United States, and it wasn't until the PSP game Dracula X Chronicles when we actually got to see the full version of Castlevania Rondo of Blood in its entirety. I also quickly want to talk about how much I enjoyed the music of Rondo of Blood. While the Castlevania series has always had a great soundtrack with iconic themes, Rondo of Blood is the first game where I really liked the music tracks. This might be why I enjoyed playing through it so much, which is a great thing. I enjoyed many of the remixes for iconic themes like Vampire Killer and Bloody Tears, but my absolute favorite track is the first theme introducing Richter at the beginning of the game. It's called Divine Bloodlines and is very fitting for setting up the tone of the game from the very first level, as well as also showing us Richter for the first time. Take a listen real quick and see why Castlevania still has some of the best video game music out there. There are some iconic music pieces in this game that I feel like deserve a whole lot more credit that they don't really get their due because they get overshadowed by a lot of other music tracks from other games. But even then, I feel like some of the more iconic music tracks that do get remixed from previous games do also sound much more better than they ever have beforehand. And I feel like Castlevania Rondo of Blood deserves a little bit more credit in the music department because of that. But regardless though, besides aesthetics and music and all that other jazz, let's talk about gameplay, which is very important with Rondo of Blood because it definitely influenced later games in the series. Castlevania Rondo of Blood takes the series back to a more traditional approach with its gameplay. You still have the Vampire Killer whip and you have many different sub-weapons to use with all those hearts you find from whipping torches, but there are a few things different about Rondo of Blood that stand out from its predecessors. Super Castlevania 4 on the SNES gave players the ability to whip in 8 directions, but Rondo of Blood confusingly doesn't have this. Richter can only attack left and right whether he's standing, crouching, or jumping, making his movements and attacks much more limited than his ancestors. This makes the game pretty difficult, especially when you can't attack enemies diagonally and have to deal with many monsters that are coming at you from all directions. There is an additional playable character named Maria, who has a double jump and possesses attacks and abilities that differ from Richter. However, you need to find and rescue her in Stage 2 before you can play as her in-game, so most of the time you're still controlling Richter. The knockback that was infamous from the NES Castlevania games makes a return and will still be the death of you many times over. Trust me, you'll definitely get knocked back into a bottomless pit at some point and will just have to deal with it. A great thing about this game, however, is how Rondo of Blood includes branching paths between levels. Depending on how you finish a stage, you can traverse a completely new level with different enemies and a boss to fight at the end. This was a cool feature that started in Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, and it works out very well here. As far as I know, Castlevania Rondo of Blood is the first game of the series to also utilize a save feature. Previous games had a password feature to help you continue your progress when you shut the game off, but Rondo of Blood lets you save your game at the last stage that you reach. There is still a password system, but it's a supplemental thing to being able to save your game. Though it dials things back from other advancements in the series, Rondo of Blood does well in feeling more like a true Castlevania game by following the footsteps of its predecessors. Now, many other people that have looked at this game before me always acknowledge that it feels like a step back in the gameplay department when compared to something like Super Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo. And for that matter, I have to agree with them. You can't ignore the fact that you're not able to whip in all different types of directions, you're not able to hang on stuff, and there's a lot of other little things that Super Castlevania 4 did that you just don't have in Rondo of Blood. But also at the same time, personally for me, Castlevania Rondo of Blood feels a little bit more in line with the same type of feel and gameplay that you got with the NES games. Even though it could have benefited with a lot of the positive changes that remake of the first Castlevania game did get, I feel like Rondo of Blood kind of has more of a focus on the backgrounds and the style and the music and the overall presentation rather than changing up the core formula of the gameplay that we've gotten in all different types of Castlevania games. One of the things I really do like about Rondo of Blood that's kind of different from previous Castlevania games is the return of this kind of branching path system with some of the different levels that you could visit throughout the entirety of the game. This was first established in Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse on the NES, which in my opinion was actually very beneficial. You get a little bit something different every time you play it. But Castlevania Rondo of Blood takes things a little bit further with the addition of a new playable character, some other different types of things that change up the ending of the game, and a whole bunch of other little stuff that I won't spoil here, but also really adds a whole lot of replay value to the entirety of the experience. One thing I should also mention is how Castlevania Rondo of Blood has multiple endings. When you rescue Maria and find the other hidden maidens in various stages, you unlock the true ending to the story, even though it technically isn't canon to the main Castlevania storyline. I appreciate stuff like this because it rewards players who put in the extra effort to go through everything in the game, but if I'm being totally honest, there's a lot of frustration involved when searching for all the lost maidens and playing through all the optional stages. Trying to figure out what you're supposed to do isn't always clear and might require you to look online or ask a friend to do so. But when you finally figure it out, you'll experience more of what Rondo of Blood has hidden away. The multiple ending approach is used again in later games of the series, eventually becoming a staple of the Castlevania games moving forward. If you've ever played Castlevania Rondo of Blood before, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and it feels like, again, you could explore all different types of stuff in the same levels and never truly see everything that it has to offer. Even for those that played the remake Dracula X Chronicles later on when it came out on the PSP, this was something that was very interesting and very unique that made the game stand out compared to some of the more iconic games of the series. So overall, can I really recommend that you guys play through Castlevania Rondo of Blood? To be totally honest with you guys, I really enjoyed playing through Rondo of Blood. I think it's probably one of my favorite entries in the Castlevania series. I feel like the presentation, the overall aesthetic is really what a lot of people associate Castlevania with that also inspired later entries of the series. I really enjoy the music, I think the visuals look cool. Even though the gameplay could feel somewhat limited compared to other games that came beforehand, I still think that everything comes together rather well. If you've never played through Rondo of Blood and you never actually experienced this part of the Castlevania saga, you could actually pick it up with the Castlevania Requiem collection that's on PlayStation 4 right now. It's not the remake of Dracula X Chronicles that was on the PSP, this is the original PC Engine version, which I feel like is pretty damn cool. But either way, even though those are my thoughts about Castlevania Rondo of Blood, let me know what's up in the comment section down below. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this game. And of course, as always, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for all my videos just like this one, my podcast shows, my vlogs. There's a whole lot of great content that I know you guys will enjoy. And of course, big shoutouts to Jasmine Russell who supported me at the Beast tier level on my Patreon page. You're getting shoutouts for the entire month on every single video. If you guys want that same type of love, make sure you guys check out the description box down below. There's a link to my Patreon page. There's a whole bunch of exclusive content there for every single tier level. You guys will definitely enjoy checking it out. But of course, you guys aren't here just for this game. You guys are here and kind of primed and ready to see what I think about the next game in this actual saga, which I think you guys pretty much know exactly what I'm talking about, so there's no sense in hiding it. Am I right? That's exactly what's coming up next. I'll see you guys next time for that game. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.